building. He wants you to change the zoning code to conform to what he wants. That's not reasonable. You have to have a zoning code that makes the citizens comfortable. I've had complaints about from people through Trout Creek Watershed about building heights and about how many buildings are being constructed. And I can imagine that a higher building, and so can you, will permit a building to be constructed that can house more than one family. Now, he says he wants to build a single-family dwelling. Okay, fine. He wants to let him build a single-family dwelling, but let him build it within the existing code, because obviously Bentley Homes has cooperated with the code before. It's conformed to the code before. I grew up in a duplex house. There was a top floor apartment, there was a bottom floor apartment, and there was an attic on top of that. If you allow a building of additional height, you can possibly and reasonably enable a developer to have an argument to build a multifamily house where now none exists. That's not reasonable for you to enable that. It's not your job to make a business easy for somebody. It's their job to figure out how to do business in conformity with the requirements. I have to do that. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put in a claim for hardship and say, I want to build a Wawa in my front yard because I need the income. You see, it gets to be ridiculously absurd. Now, several municipalities bordering the township have certain building codes. There is no reason why Tredyffrin has to conform to the building codes in other townships. And I'm going to tell you, if you do that, let's look at the ordinance regarding stormwater management. We have a reputation for having the strongest stormwater management ordinance in the area. Let's change it to conform. Stephen, shall we change the ordinance to conform to the other municipalities that have lesser requirements? Shall we do that? Because it's easier for a builder to build a property, build a house, because he doesn't have to spend so much money on stormwater management? Is that reasonable? It's a rhetorical question. I know you would say no, if I may. And I see the smile. I say I agree with you, smile. I will accept that. Now, at the same time, Bentley, as I said, had no trouble, and I repeat on purpose because it comes up in the next point on his thing. The amendment will resolve the conflict in building height definitions. Who cares? There's no conflict. I just explained how they're two different points for two different kinds of buildings. I mean, you have zoning requirements for office buildings, zoning requirements for factory. Yes, Mark.
The problem is you're saying it's different parts of the zoning. It's not.
I'm sorry?
It's the building code on the one hand, the building code,
yeah.
the UCC, state law building code on the one hand, and our local ordinance on the other hand that are conflicting. Not two parts of the same ordinance.
Yeah, I understand that.
Okay.
I understand what you're saying. However, the petitioner, Grogan, for Bentley, is saying that you have adopted this code, and he seems to suggest, now my understanding from reading his thing, and I spent a long time reading it because you know I do that, my impression is that the two are somehow combined. Okay, you have to build things according to one thing in one case and according to other rules in another case. That's not unreasonable.
It's talking about the same situation, and they are conflicting. Now, the township, we would argue that the township zoning would trump the building code, but it's very confusing to have them conflicting.
I'm sorry, say it again.
They are talking about the same exact situation. if that makes sense.
No. What same exact situation?
The peak height, and I don't remember exactly how
It's median height and peak height.
Right, and so it's talking about the same type of buildings.
Same type, but is it identical?
Yes.
You know, we're the same type of people, but we're not all identical.
Right, so it is in direct conflict with each other, is my understanding.
All this is this is why it's a proposal. It's going to go through County Planning Commission, our Planning Commission. It's going to be comments, could be changes. It's going to go back and forth. This is the early stages, and all this will be hashed out at those stages.
Well,
we don't even have a formal.
You know, I'm not arguing with Mr. Martin. I know he's right. The point is, do you have to go through all that stuff if you realize that there's no reason to do it? Because Bentley Homes has already built houses in this township in conformity with current zoning and building codes or requirements. However, this time, and I repeat on purpose, and I'll repeat it loudly so everybody in the township hears me, he wants to build a larger building, and he wants you to change the code to conform to his desire, period. That's what he wants. Now, the township code gives fair notice. He said if with this condition, with this apparent conflict, there is a possibility of liability on the part of the developer from doing something wrong. He says, I can't understand how he could not know what the code says when he's already described it. There is no liability here because he understands the code, he has conformed to it in the past, and he can live with it in the future, because there is no reason for him not to, other than he wants to build a bigger building. Oh, gee whiz, I want a big building. No, it doesn't work like that. Violation is not possible because the information is public notice. It's all over the place. It's in the zoning code. It's on your website. It's everywhere you need to look. Now, some questions that I think you need to consider, and I'm just about done, so be patient with me, please. What is the reason for the petition to amend the township zoning code? Is it a good citizen attempt to correct an error in the code by eliminating an apparent conflict within the code regarding the height of a building? Does the code really describe two different methods of regulating a height of a building, or do the two different methods apply to two different kinds of buildings, two different designs? Now, what advantage, I'm not asking you to answer the questions, you have to think about them, okay? You don't have to tell me, no, it doesn't, yes, it does, or any of that stuff, okay? Because I'm not taking a position on whether or not it's a good thing to change. I'm just pointing out why maybe it doesn't need to be changed. Maybe things are okay, okay? Now, does the code, let's say, what advantage does the petitioner gain if the petition is granted? How does the proposed amendment affect building heights throughout the township? Can it lead to multi-story, multi-family houses, which people in this area, township, object to? I've gotten a number of letters about overdevelopment. One person even sent me a portfolio of, I think, 5 different locations of huge multi-family buildings, 140 apartments and all of this kind of thing, like the one being built on Sweetsford Road. Now, whether or not I object to it as Trout Creek Watershed is not important. We're nonpartisan. We're not supposed to object to anything. Okay, we just present a position. Okay? Now, should the amendment be added to the zoning code because it would provide one standard for measuring the height of a peaked roof? Or please consider what unintended consequences would the proposed amendment cause? Would the amendment allow buildings of greater height in an area characterized by buildings of lower height? What else can the Board of Supervisors imagine could happen with a zoning change of this sort? You have to get together and decide that. I can't decide that for you. And what is the ultimate, finally, bottom line question, very basic, most important question of all? is what is the ultimate benefit to Bentley Homes if the zoning ordinance is amended in the manner requested by the petitioner? He gets to build his bigger building and charge more money and make a bigger profit. You're not in the profit business. You don't need to help people make profits. You only have, I won't say that. That's never mind, scratch that idea. But you don't have to do that. It's not something you are obliged to do. I don't know of any law that says you have to change an ordinance to suit a builder, although I do know that the municipality's planning code is pro-builder and anti-citizen. I've read it, okay? I've read it. That's my opinion of it anyway. But you may disagree. But you need to consider this more carefully than just whether or not to send it on to the Planning Commission. You need to decide whether it's really of any value to the township, to the citizens of the township, who are really the people who matter, whether or not is of any importance. Dr. Gossi, I'm listening.
Thank you very much
It's only
for your
fair.
comments. All right. Do we have any other citizen comments? All right.
Can I give you this?
I do have a comment that, I resent being told that we're against citizens. I'm sorry? I resent being told that we're against citizens. Okay? The citizens put us here. We're here for the citizens. The citizens actually care about lots of things. So I will vote according to what I believe are in the township's best interests and the interests of the citizens as a whole. And I thank you for your comments. Some of them, they were insightful, but thank you for them.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for listening.
All right, I think we are ready to move to the vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed?
Nay, I'm opposed.
All right.
I understand the logic behind making them the same, but I don't want to support anything that leads to taller buildings in Tredyffrin. Thank you.
All right, thank
Just,
you.
let me just, Aaron, can you just, the difference in height in this situation, let's just say, what difference are we talking about in height of the roof?
I mean, it would depend on the pitch of the roof, but probably maybe 2 to 4 feet, I would say.
Okay.
Maybe 3 feet, depending. Again, it depends on the pitch of the roof, because you're going to take the average where, at the one side it's going to be, say, 0. And
And this is the roof area?
The roof area, yeah. I'm talking about the roof pitch. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Okay,
If
so
you-
we are moving to the next motion, which is the motion to authorize staff to advertise a public hearing on June 20th, 2023 to consider and possibly adopt ordinance HR 467 to prohibit parking on Continental Boulevard. Ms. Fuller.
Yes, this is a project we've been working on for quite a while, a number of years, and we've had some issues. This is a township road, and we've had issues with the roads really breaking down. Darren's been out there, probably can speak to it far better than I, but it is his recommendation, our recommendation, that we go ahead and do a no parking signs on both sides of that street.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second? Any board comment? Any public comment? All right, hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. We move to new matters. Do we have any board member new matters tonight?
Yes, Dr. Garcia, actually, I did have, this is a question for Engineer Burgo, and on the Chesterbrook Boulevard project that we completed over 202, and was there any particular, I believe it is completed successfully on time, and there are no concerns now about further water infiltration in that bridge?
Supervisor Bascart, no, the work that was approved by the board back in March was completed in early April by Loftus Construction, the contractor. They did complete the resealing of the bridge deck between the two structures on the surface to prevent water infiltration, and they did remove some loose concrete underneath and seal that as well, so there's no more immediate danger for any of the motorists traveling on 202. They did do that, and one good notice is they did save the township some money because they actually were able to get done sooner than they had originally proposed. I think we had $123,000 that the board approved in March, and they did finish with about $16,600 some dollars of savings. So it was only about $106,000, I think it was, somewhere in there.
Yep, thank you. And also I want to congratulate all the parties involved on completion of the Pew Road Bridge. I know that was unanticipated and probably caused a lot of, let's say, challenges to people driving on that. So I'm glad to see it done, and the new bridge looks really nice.
Thank you. Any other board member, new matters?
I'm not sure this is a new matter, but I misspoke during my supervisor liaison report. So the next zoning hearing board meeting is this Thursday, but the Wawa decision won't be until July 11th.
Thanks for clarifying. Can you restate the date?
The Wawa decision will be July 11th.
All right, do we have any citizen new matters tonight?
One quick matter, Chair Gassi. I wasn't here for the stormwater special hearing a couple weeks ago, and I just wanted to ask if there's any consideration if we should possibly pause the stormwater fee consultant contract while we consider other funding mechanisms, not just for stormwater, but for fire, capital projects and other things going on in the township. If there's a potential savings that we should capture while we discuss those other items, it may be worth our while to just hit pause on that for a little bit. And I just didn't know if anybody had discussed that.
I do not recall that had been discussed specifically.
Does anybody else on the board have any interest in doing something like that, considering we could be saving some money?
I'm not sure I understand the proposal.
So right now, I guess we have a stormwater fee consultant contract that's ongoing that we're paying Jacobs, and they're coming up with a proposal for how we would go ahead and structure and implement the stormwater fee. What I'm saying is, while we're looking at potentially other options for funding for not just stormwater, but other fiscal issues in the township, should we just hit pause on the stormwater fee consultant while we look at other options?
One thing I would ask is, what is the timeline for when we were, at the end of the meeting, we discussed the legal risk. When is the timeline of when we were thinking about making a decision on that?
So what we had kind of been throwing out there was getting the alternate revenue study back, looking at that in conjunction with the stormwater management fee. We're at a point with that study, with the stormwater study, where the board's going to have to essentially choose whether or not we should take on the legal risk with implementing the fee, and the way that we've talked about it and planned for, or potentially switching over to more of like a real estate tax and implementing that. We have another meeting. We have one more advisory group meeting in June. I think it's the week before our board meeting, which, that I think there was a lot of feedback on this fee versus tax within that group. And so I would say realistically, we could probably, we'd be looking at sometime, probably our July meeting, where we would want the board to be ready to kind of choose a path if we go down that road with stormwater.
So to answer, I guess, Mr. Holt's question, if we were to just pull the plug at this point on the fee on the stormwater consultant, how much have we already, I don't even.
We're probably more than halfway through the overall project at this point. The reason we're up against we're at a fork in the road is, it changes what what we do the rest of the year with them, which is start working on implementation, and then how we develop. It would be either, if we went down the tax road, it would be develop a tax rebate program. If we stuck with a fee, it's developing a fee program. That's kind of the next step in the.
So you're saying we are at a decision point?
We are.
Okay, and that'll be in July, you think?
So we have our last advisory group meeting in June, and then before, the way we've been talking to Jacobs is we're not gonna move forward with anything until we know which direction the board wants to go in.
So does that answer your question?
Right, if there's nothing for them to be doing, if they're not billing us while we're making the decision, then I'm fine with doing nothing. I just wanted to make sure that they're not actively, going ahead and hitting the register there and doing their work right now. Okay, so what's done is done until they hear back from us.
They'll be prepping. We'll be prepping with them for our June advisory group meeting based off of the feedback we got. But then after that, and we have a lot of, I would say it's a lot of general information. I think the next steps are really diving into the specifics and like I said, working towards implementation one way or the other. And so there's a natural break there until the board does make a decision. And then from that point, we can decide to, as Supervisor Holt suggested, you can, work with Jacobs on what happens after that.
What I understood was that it sounds like end of June, July is going to be, until that, we should continue the path we're on, but that's going to be, that point is the break point, I think, that where we can reevaluate I think that's the way I understand.
Agreed. Yep.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other citizen new matters? Board new matters? Any citizen new matters? All right.
Hi, I'm Jack McAllister. I lived at 455 Walker Road for over 50 years. I founded the Valley Forge Civic Group with over 550 members. I work for the board on a stormwater team of 13 fellows looking at the Trout Creek Overlay Ordinance. And I also negotiated a settlement with the Joe Duckworth and Son they were suing the township. And I negotiated a settlement with that the township board, you guys accepted. I have a rather frivolous question. And my question is, what was the rationale behind the 15-cent tax on paper bags? And I just don't understand what the rationale was behind it. And if anybody could tell me that, I haven't seen the ordinance, I haven't done diligence on this topic. I'm just curious because I'm scratching my head about it. Okay.
I'm happy to. Go. All right, go ahead.
I can respond to that. So basically, if you replace single-use plastic bags and people do single-use paper bags, that actually doesn't really help the environment, because a paper bag itself can, has cost, it weighs more than a plastic bag, and it, you're cutting down trees and so on. So the main benefit that way, if you were to just do that, is that a paper bag won't, clog your storm drains. But research suggested that if you put and this is based on experiences with other towns around the country. So the Environmental Advisory Council did some research on this, and they found that if you charge a 15-cent fee as a minimum, then what will happen is that people tend to reuse the bags rather than take the single-use bag and discard it. So it's mostly to try and migrate from single-use plastic bags to not single-use paper bags, but bags that are reusable, whether they're paper or cloth or whatever. So that was the reason.
Well, I think basically your argument, I understand, but I think it's counterproductive, because I myself am not paying the 15 cents for the bag. And what I do now is I'm being forced to use a plastic bag. And if your ordinance was targeted at plastic bags, I'm all for it, because plastic is basically ruining the entire planet.
What kind of plastic bag are you using?
All the plastic bags that are used that I use the white ones. You buy a big roll of them, and I use those plastic bags. They don't.
You just use them for a single time, or use them over and over?
One time, and then throw it in the garbage. So my garbage now is using plastic bags, whereas previously it was using Trader Joe's highly biodegradable bags generated by recycled cardboard and guaranteed to degrade rapidly in the landfills.
Can I ask why you don't use a reusable bag?
For garbage?
No,
He's talking about his garbage liner.
Oh, garbage.
Garbage, yeah.
Oh, you mean the bags that you would get from the supermarket you would use in your bathroom trash?
And they're biodegradable. Now you're forcing me into bags that are plastic for the garbage. So it's a counterproductive ordinance, okay? Further, all the paper bags are mostly made from recycled cardboard and sawdust. And therefore, it's not relative to the concepts of global warming, where we're chopping trees down and burning them, etc. So I just don't understand it. So I don't know the name of the ordinance. I don't know anything about it. I wasn't here. I'm very busy with family matters. But I go to the supermarket and I ask them, why am I paying this 15 cents? Oh, there's an ordinance. I said, okay. Does it make any sense to you? No, it doesn't make any sense to us.
So first of all, you raise an excellent point, I think. And it is the reuse of the plastic bags for small trash cans, I think is a very valid, that's probably the best argument, I think, for not, I think it's the best argument. I will tell you, the fact that they're biodegradable, to me, versus not biodegradable is irrelevant, because once it hits the landfill, whether it's biodegradable or not, it's not really biodegradable.
That's very important, because the material inside doesn't degrade. And so it's
but in a landfill, in the anaerobic situation, I don't know that even a biodegradable bag is degrading. But putting that aside, I think I think if you want to know so there's a couple of rationales. One is, and I'll take it because I've talked to a number of different townships and municipalities about this. And so the first part of the rationale is, let's stop using the plastic bags. Now I do, and I agree that some people, I did too, I put them in my bathroom trash can, but yeah, and I reused them, and I had a big pile, although sometimes I'd get a plastic bag full with about 100 other plastic bags, and eventually it would take up so much room in the closet I would just eventually throw it away. So the idea was, yes, sometimes they get reused, but more often than not, they just get thrown out. Okay, so that was the idea. Let's stop using the plastic bags for the shopping. Right. So then the question was paper bags. Right. And I can tell you, I've discussed this we've discussed it here. I've discussed it, because I was of two minds on it. On the one hand, I'm like, the big issue is the plastic. We're getting into the plastic. What do we care about the paper? The other side of that is paper still has its own, even though it's recycled cardboard and other things, it still has its harms by filling up the landfills with paper, okay? And the idea, the ultimate hope is that people are going to use reusable bags. Now, I will tell you that I myself, I don't always bring a reusable bag into the supermarket with me. I try to make sure it gets back in the car.
Recyclable.
But I do sometimes. Yeah. But when I don't, and I'm at the Acme or wherever, and it's a 15 cent, I will tell you that now I think about it, which I really wasn't thinking about it before. So that's one advantage. And I will tell you, number two is I try and get as much as I can, even though it's only 15 cents. I try and get as much as I can into a single bag, as opposed to saying I'll just get 3 bags, I'll fill them up halfway. And I remember even in my economics 101 class in college, I remember my professor saying, because we had the student newspapers, right? And they would always be strewn, particularly on a Sunday morning, strewn all over the quad. And he said, if you charged 15 cents for one of those, people wouldn't be grabbing whole piles of them and just throwing them out because they're for free. because you're putting a price on it. So I know Mr. McAllister, you're an engineer, right?
Correct.
So I think the idea is, and I'll use the engineering term, because this was big in the 80s in environmental philosophy, internalizing the externalities. I think the idea is you're trying to internalize the external impacts on the environment, you're trying to internalize them by putting a cost on it. Instead of just, you're using a bag, it goes into the landfill, it doesn't cost you anything. Now it's costing you minimal, but still enough to make you think about it. You may not like it, and you raise some really good responses to it, but from my view, that's the reason.
See, what I'm doing now is I'm taking new plastic bags from Costco.
Get that? I think that's a valid.
I say, it's counterproductive.
That's a
Whereas
valid
before
point.
I was using, Trader Joe's bag, which is biodegradable. Now the plastic bag that I'm using from Costco is not biodegradable.
What about taking the paper bag and sticking it into your bathroom trash can? Take the paper bag and put it into your trash can.
That would be fine. I don't want to pay for it when I could get it free from Trader Joe's until you guys put a tax on it.
Yeah, but biodegradable. So anyway.
So I could pay 15 cents and I'd have my biodegradable bag. I'm too cheap to do that.
All right, well, thank you for coming out.
I don't know the ordinance. I would like to read the ordinance because what you guys, if you intended to stop the plastic bags, a great idea. Plastic bags are polluting our oceans. I mean, the whales are getting all kinds of problems with it. So all over the world, plastic should be outlawed. And most foods they're xenoestrogen, and they basically are bad to be around foods. So, but paper bags are great, and you guys are making it very difficult to use paper bags now for cheapskates like me. Anyway, thank you.
All right, thank you.
If somebody could tell me the ordinance number, I'd like to know that. Is there a way of getting the ordinance number?
Yeah, it is.
It's on our website.
Is it on the website?
It's chapter 165, single-use plastics.
Yeah, it's
Has it been codified online yet?
It's HR 454.
Yes.
I'm curious about something that came up it wasn't verbalized during the discussion of the Grogan petition for changing the zoning code. And I did not mention in his cover letter, he said that he has paid a $5,000 permit fee and is therefore, and along with his submission of a request for an amendment to the zoning code. Now, I understand that the township has a right to charge permit fees for a variety of things, and that's not really the question. The question is, why is a developer permitted to pay $5,000, write up a proposal for an amendment to a zoning code, and then you consider it, and not just you specifically, but I know it's a big process and we don't need to go over that, but you covers a lot of people. However, I noticed you asked for references earlier. In your ordinances, you have the Chapter 31 Township of Tredyffrin Home Rule Charter. It describes the process of citizen involvement in municipal government. And it says, any qualified citizen of the township may participate in the governing of the township by and a variety of things. And then it says, half a page down, it says in section 31.10, 1002, it says the qualified voters of the township shall have the power, subject to the procedures and limitations set forth herein, subject to the procedures and limitations set forth herein, to propose the initiation of ordinances or repeal ordinances previously enacted by the board, Now, I propose that the idea of amending an ordinance is pretty similar, if not identical, to proposing an ordinance. It's kind of like the difference between the median height of a building with peaked roof and the height of a building with a peaked roof, if you see what I mean. I hope you follow my logic. That section is 2.5 pages of procedures. It states, all petition papers for the purpose of initiating or repealing an ordinance shall bear in ink the signatures, addresses, and date of signing of at least 20% of the registered electors of the township. Please explain why a developer does not have to have the signatures of 20% of the registered electors in order to change a zoning code that will affect all of the registered electors and all of the people who live here who are not yet registered electors.
I mean, I believe that we're just starting the process, then it goes through all
No. Wait a minute. I just, what I'm looking for is equity. I'm looking for equity. I'm not asking you for your reason why a developer can do it and I can't.
Well, no one said you can't. Who said you can't?
It says, can I give you a check for $5,000 and an amendment?
You can follow the same process the developer followed.
I can?
Yes.
Where does it say that? Because I'll tell you,
Municipalities planning code and our ordinances.
I'm not being rude or...
Municipalities planning code.
Municipalities planning code states...
And our ordinances implementing it.
Is that correct?
I'm looking at our solicitor who... Municipalities planning code and our ordinances sets forth the process for amending an ordinance.
Okay, I'll look.
That's a state law. It's state law.
I understand and I appreciate your pointing that out because I have read the municipalities planning code and it's been a while, I don't remember seeing it. I have not found anything in the township ordinances that says a developer has to pay this fee and then can present his amendment. I just have not been able to find it. If it's there,
well, the fee,
I'm sure
I don't know
it
that
is.
the fee is, I think each municipality gets to set its own fee.
Well,
that's part of the fee schedule
okay.
that gets passed every year, but the process is set out in the municipality planning code and the ordinances.
Okay, so I can give you a check and an amendment, and then you will process my amendment.
Well, consider it. Doesn't mean...
I understand that, because you're considering Bentley's, Grogan's proposal.
Right.
You're not just saying, yeah, go ahead and do it. I recognize that. I'm not arguing with you. I do recognize it. I just saw it as a massive discrepancy, a total failure of equity between the developers and the citizens. The developer doesn't even have to live here, and he can screw us all up with a building that's so, you know what I mean. You understand what I mean. So it is in the municipalities planning code. I will read it again and see if I can find it.
I think zoning, I think it's chapter 6. I don't remember. It's too late. I think it's...
All right, maybe you could email Mr. Coonan after the area that he should look at.
Okay, Attorney Fuller, can I contact you perhaps and find that information?
Certainly, or Mr. McKenna, that would be even better.
I'm sorry?
Mr. McKenna, he's right next door to me, but I'll make sure he knows to answer.
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right. Do we have any other citizen new matters tonight? All right. Our next meeting is June 20th, 2023. Note that this is a Tuesday, not a Monday. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. Everyone get a good night of sleep.